Most heartfelt greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlethems. I eagerly welcome you to Sturgeons' most premier station, DuskLight Radio. Hosted by yours truly, the incorporeal, iridescent, infinitesimal Everett J. Blackwell. Perhaps you know of us, or we ran the only arcade facility in town for a while. Blackwell's billiards, ball games, and bistros. Great Uncle Lester was big on alliteration. Didn't know a damn how to cook, though. We had all manner of wonders. Video games you'd never heard of, but everyone wanted to play. We had Mortal Coil 8, Scourge of the Reality Benders, Nihilist Warriors Deluxe, Lair of the Ubermensch, Cheddar's Great Quest, and Pac-Man 2, The New Adventures. We also had a ton of Sturgeon classic games like Spot the Blighted, Spelunking in the Fear Pit, Muscle Spasm Simulator, and a day trip to the 13th Circle of Hell with the Baron. A lot of folks had to sign waivers before coming through our doors. Things got messy. There weren't all too many issues, not to begin with anyways, but when we installed this one game, Rubicon, people started to gravitate towards it. They'd line up and play on that above anything else in the arcade, drawn like moths to the flame when staring at its rather basic green cabinet. I hear the graphics weren't much to spit at, the gameplay was subpar at best, and the music was tinny. But something kept people coming back and trying to get into the echelon of the elite scoreboard. And when they did, they'd get issued a special download code, and upon reading it, would walk into the back rooms of the arcade without any word. No matter what our staff tried to do, you could not stop them. And that'd be the end for a lot of folks. But we did see someone once come back out. Not a kid, but an old, brittle man. Yellow and brown teeth with skin clinging to his face like it was wrapped on with cling film. Said he'd found his way out and beat the game after so long. Took in a deep breath and smiled. Uncle Lester asked him what he won, and he whispered it to him before darting off for the woods on the other side of the parking lot. I don't know what he said, listeners, but Uncle Lester didn't say much after that, and the arcade closed soon after when he won himself an elite high score on Rubicon and a subsequent download code. I don't need to tell you what happened next. Sometimes I think I hear him behind me in the waning hours of the night, when no one's around, asking for help. Families, right? If you're just joining us, first of all, welcome and do not skip. I promise each of these are unique in their own way. We don't put in paid ads in your favorite cereal boxes for nothing, you know. Anyway, I'm DuskLight's main and most fabulous half-dead host. My job at this fine radio station is to bring you some of the most twisted, interesting, and downright bizarre tales that I and my wonderful many-legged runners collect from the far corners of Sturgeon and beyond. Some of them will make you laugh, some will make you cry, and some, well, I don't know how to say this, but some make people build a tent city. Make you build a tent city. We all tried to tell you it was a bad idea, that those Pinterest groups and Vogue magazines had warped your mind into what a tent city was. That here we can't just do that without reaping the consequences. But you wouldn't listen. You foreclosed your home, sold your possessions save for a few essentials, and bought a Tent City Modifier 7750. Set up shop in the Obsidian Woods and told us all to come visit sometime. We would never visit. Nobody can ever visit a tent city in Sturgeon. You may feel yourself snug, safe, and complete within the thin membrane of that vast city, but many eyes are now upon your new dominion and they will want to claim it. I don't know why the story urged you to do something so foolish, and if you're listening to this, maybe there's still a chance for you to get out. Do you remember the way out? As your kingdom expanded, you lost track of where everything was. Things started to go missing, essentials would vanish and turn up in other places, sleeping bags slashed and filled with sawdust. I don't know if they can smell you yet, listener, but once they do, they will not let you leave. A tent city must never be created in Sturgeon. Never. It's time to introduce our next story for this evening. It's called simply Rat King, which is both an amazing title and a horrifying concept. It comes to us from uncrowned king of experimental horror, Max Voynich. You may recall Max from his other terrifying and strange tales here at DuskLight. There will be a playlist link later. This will not be the last, but it may be the most heart-wrenching so far. Get those tissues ready, folks. Max wanted me to let you know about his podcast, a take at the surreal and somehow familiar Happy and We Know It, where he and his compatriot Rory dissect the show for your listening pleasure with interesting results. Best experienced on your own. He decided the way to remind me of this was to get up close to my face, sweat dripping from his brow and onto my ear, whispering, "Happy and we know it," over and over as his tongue extended from betwixt his teeth, cleaning his moist eyes as something behind the membrane glistened. I told him that I was happy and I did know it, but all he did was get closer, pressing his skin against mine, as if trying to move atoms so that we could meld into one truly happy being that knows all, sees all. You can find Happy and We Know It on all podcasting platforms. Max also has a subreddit r/Max Voynich, link below. Special thanks must be given first to Mandy Mo for rendering yours truly in the beauteous image you see when you look at our page. Next, DuskLight bows at the altar of Trevor Henderson, the man behind Siren Head, for allowing DuskLight to use some of the images he's captured of various abominations. Our cast today features our chaotic, evil purple crayon emperor, TJ Lee, all hail his janitorial wisdom, and of course, lest we forget, some of the music you hear in our videos is provided by the Dark Somnium with gracious thanks. With that, the sun has set and dusk has crawled into the studio once more. Whether you're working, prepping to sleep, or evading the formless void that will one day consume us all, we thank you for joining us here at our premiere, and Blackwell is here to soothe your ears and captivate your soul. Now, close your eyes and take a deep breath. The scene has been set and the light is on. It's time to walk towards it. Rat King. Noun. A collection of rats whose tails are intertwined and bound together by one of several possible mechanisms, such as entangling material like hair, or sticky substances like sap or gum, or getting tied together. The first time he coughs like that, we're halfway through a game. It's wet and rasping, and he doubles over as he tries to force it out of his throat. I stop. "Are you sick?" He rolls his eyes. "Kings don't get sick." I can see that look on his face. Like he doesn't want the world around us to change. Like he doesn't want the dragons to turn back to trees, or his crown to turn from gold to twigs and string. He doesn't want this imaginary world to collapse in on itself. I don't want to stop playing either, but the second cough drops him to his knees, and he has to reach his small arm out to steady himself against my leg. I bend down and pick him up by his armpits, hoisting him until he's back on his own 2 feet, and tug on his hand. "Let's go." Kings don't get sick, but little brothers do. I give his hand a squeeze, and we set off home. It takes us a little while to get back. His coughs mean we have to stop every few minutes, and we have to take extra care to avoid the tunnels once it starts getting dark. I'm sure they're just rumors, just fiction, but I can't help letting parts of them take root in my mind. The rumors change depending on who you speak to, and whether it's told to you by an old drunk or a cautious teacher, but they all have a few things in common. They say that years and years ago, sometime in the 50s, there was a huge underground complex under our town. A complex that spread out in all directions like a fungus. Something happened down there, although what this event actually was changes from person to person, and it was abandoned. Some claim that a whole city actually lived down there, and were forced to evacuate after the nuclear reactor went into meltdown. They say it's a huge government cover-up, and that this is the reason that strange aircraft makes flybys over our otherwise boring little town. Some claim that the complex was populated by a strange cult that made a deal with something so terrible and ancient that they can never see the light of day again. I've even heard people say that the junkies found the labyrinth of tunnels under the city and used it to navigate the town and smuggle in dope until they stumbled upon something that trapped them down there. And they call the people who supposedly live under the surface rats, claim that after years without sunlight they went pale and lost their vision, and that they'll chase you using only the sound of your feet if you wander too deep. Wayward little boys and girls will get chased by the rats with milky eyes and long fingers, until they're caught and eaten whole. Whatever the truth is, there's something below the surface. Something wrong. Something that makes the children sick and the adults wary and paranoid. When we get home, my parents rush my brother to hospital, and he stays there for several days whilst they run all these kinds of tests. I'm allowed to visit on the third day, and I find my mother sat in the waiting room, holding his twig crown in her hands. She gestures to the crown. Contamination risk. My brother seems to have somehow shrunk in the past 3 days, although perhaps that's just perspective. He is, after all, surrounded by huge machines that whir and beep, and tubes that loop over the side of his bed. He smiles when he sees me, makes a movement to give me a hug, but the doctor calmly puts his hand on his chest. No sudden movements. I try and hold it together, to be the best big brother I can be, kissing his forehead, stroking his hair, and telling him he's going to be alright. I try and ignore the look in the doctor's face. At the end of the third day, they take my parents into a separate room, and I can only make out their silhouettes through the misted glass. I could see my mother put her head in her hands, and my father put his arm around her. They don't say anything until we get home, where my father calmly takes every plate out of the drawer and smashes them against the wall. A dozen porcelain explosions. And then he collapses to the floor with huge, animal sobs. I cook dinner and we eat it out the pan. I understand. Our life becomes a series of trips to and from the hospital, and I'm entrusted with carrying out tasks that were meant for my brother. It's strange, although he was far younger than me, 6 years to be precise, there must have been some tradition about these falling about the men in the family. Each week I take bundles of food and water to several spots just upstream from various tunnels or sewer entrances. There I place them in the water and watch as they follow the course of the water down and round, and eventually disappear into the black mouths of the tunnels. Sometimes, if I leave it until it gets dark, I can hear things coming from these entrances. Paranoid whispers, muted wails, something like humming. It is as if 100 people are speaking all at once, 1,000 miles away, and the echo of the echo of the echo of their voices is drifting out into the night. I make sure that whenever I visit my brother I bring him strawberries, his favourite food, until he grows too weak to eat them, until I have to cut them up with a knife and fork them into small, bite-sized pieces which I feed to him. We pretend for a while that he's still the king. I'm just a knight who's making sure my king is fed and healthy. But it soon becomes too painful. It's a reminder of the years spent outside, of long summers, of the promise that we both might, someday, grow old. Around a month later, he comes home. He is almost skin and bone at this point, but we still make the effort to have a little welcome home party. My father acts strange at dinner. I can see it in the way he moves, the redness around his eyes that suggests he's been crying. A boy like that shouldn't have to face death. He shouldn't have to grapple with it, to try and understand it, rationalise it. He looks to me. A boy like that should live forever. My brother was always the favourite, and I knew that. I didn't mind. He was my favourite too. That night I hear a rustling, hushed whispers, and the lock to the back door spring open. Curious, I peek out my blinds and see, still partially illuminated by the light from inside, my father. And in his arms, a bundle of white cloth, and a face. My brother. Immediately, I get dressed and make my way noiselessly downstairs and out the house, following as best I can in the dark. I follow down the back roads, through the fields, and eventually to the mouth of a tunnel. The roar of the water coming from it muffles my movements, and I lurk at the very edge of my father's glow as we enter. Thankfully, he doesn't look back often, and when he does, he seems to be in a trance. Eyes glazed over, and a grim expression on his face. He gets quieter as we get further and further into the tunnels, and I have to make care not to make any sound, holding my breath, taking exaggerated, short steps. There are noises, though. My father holds an old-fashioned lantern in his hand, which casts a small sphere of light across the tunnel, and every now and again he'll freeze and hold it in front of him, as if challenging someone to come out from the dark. Whispers bounce off the walls of the tunnels, saying all sorts of strange and horrible things. I hear the faint sound of manic laughter over some tuneless hum. My father carries something that makes strange, periodic clicking noises that every so often starts clicking rapidly until he moves on. There's writing on the walls, and the further we get, the more demented it gets. It goes from teenagers' graffiti to genuine warnings, telling people to stay away, that they must not go any further, welcoming us to hell. Then smaller, stranger writing, in scrawled, almost childlike letters. Stay a while. I think about the rats we were warned about, imagine them as a pack stalking me in the same way I'm following my father, milky-eyed and hungry, peering at me from crevices in the wall and from under the surface of the water. We start going down an incline, and I have to hang further back, trying to time my steps with my father so he doesn't hear me, crouching and covering my face whenever he turns around. The voices are getting louder now, and more manic. There are so many of them. I can hear arguments, confessions, laughter, songs, monologues. You never told me I never wanted to hear. I loved him, but all the times. It makes me wince. It sounds like all the thoughts of an asylum. And the smell. It starts to reek not only of shit, but of sweat and bile and curdled milk. I wonder if it's the rats speaking, or if it's some great mind leaking, their worries and anxieties and desires spilling out and into our world. My father pushes on and we get deeper. The tunnels turn from brick to concrete, and the graffiti turns to actual printed text. Plaza, 1 mile approximate. The noise starts to hit me like a wall, and I grow my confidence, standing up straight. There's no way he can hear me over this. Fucking why did they leave me here? Here to fall of all places, surrounded by these idiots. Where has it gone the last time I saw it? Incomprehensible. So many words layered over each other like it was TV static. See them. How many times have I got to let me out. And then we emerge into this vast underground chamber. It seems to be illuminated by small lights around the edge, although they're so faint it takes a while for my eyes to adjust. But even in the dim light I could see how big this thing is. How massive. As if each light is a star, hinting at unknowable depth and height. Something changes as we enter. My clothes and skin have the texture of used gum. Everything becomes sticky, like a leather seat on a hot day. My vision swims slightly. A wall of stale heat hits me, the temperature of sweat, of hot breath. Whatever it is that's here is emanating into the room and reality around us. It stinks, and the voices are deafening. I can see the bundle of clothes in my father's arms start to wriggle and shake, and he holds his lamp up, and I see it first as a wall the colour of pallid skin, until I can make out familiar shapes. Hands, arms, faces, all coming from, attached to this wall. Legs and ears and fingers all bursting from this wall like spots or growths. Hundreds of mouths moving, hands endlessly grasping at nothing, legs spasming and trying to move along the slick ground, and some shapes are more defined than others. You can see some bodies that are half absorbed by this wall, some that still have the shape of a human, shoulders, bellies, and some that have even been completely absorbed. And yet, all that's left. All that's left is facial features spread out of a massive skin. And it occurs to me that then were people. And the sound and the stench is coming from this thing. Whatever it is, this thing that laughs and screams and whoops and mutters and spits. Until it dawns on me that it's not just a wolf. Because somehow, slowly and with great effort, it's moving, swaying and stumbling, and fraction by fraction it starts to make its way towards us. The eyes that litter its surface fixed on the white bundle in my father's arms. The mouth filled with yellow teeth hollering and wailing. The fingers across the surface contracting and spasming like dying insects. And, frozen in horror, it's all I can do to watch my father take my brother out from the bundle of clothes and hold him out, to the grabbing hands and flailing arms, until they take him and pull him in, and he's too weak to resist. And the voices seem to reach a fever pitch, united for just a second as he jumps. And I can hear him scream louder and louder until I lose his voice amongst the others. We watch for a while, trying to keep track of my brother's body before the thing shifts and wobbles, and new faces appear, and what was once my brother disappears into the dark. My father turns around, walks straight towards me, grabs my hand and pulls. We have to go. Now. I have so many questions. How did he know I was here? What is this thing? Is my brother okay? But he's stronger than me, and when he tugs on my hand, I stumble after him. He says only one thing to me, once we're far enough away from the sound to turn back to whispers. He says it with tears in his eyes, and for a moment, I could see that he's not just a man, but also a boy, deep down. And that he's just as scared and hurt and confused as I am. That thing. It does not die. It does not age. A pause as he wipes the tears from his cheeks. He will not die down here. When we returned home, my mother had fallen asleep at the kitchen table waiting for us. And when we wake her, she looks at us as if we killed him ourselves. I think of my father's words. He will not die down here. And wonder if, perhaps, death might have been better. I still do the jobs that were meant for my brother, the strange rituals that were meant for the youngest of the family. I still pack and send the bundles of food into the tunnels. But now that I know what's down there, I take a few extra steps. I make sure to put strawberries amongst the food, picking the best, biggest and juiciest I can find. If I've got a spare hour or so, I'll make a little crown from twigs and string and hope that it finds him somehow in the dark. And if I get close enough to hear the whispers and shrieks and laughter, sometimes I can make out his voice amongst them. The voice of my little king. My Rat King. It just goes to show that underneath all the disgusting elements that make up the living organisms in this world, love and the bonds of family can surpass all. Even if it's just your friends. I like to think friends can be family too. Sometimes even more so. And even your enemies. As long as you keep them at a distance. Usually a knife edge. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of our other transmissions. We're adding them regularly and we'd love to have you as part of the DuskLight family by subscribing, hitting the bell of bonds, it's just a normal bell but adding stuff like that is nice, and leave a comment with stories you'd love for my many-legged runners to find. Dedication needs to be rewarded, and we thank more and more of our loyal listeners for joining these premieres each and every time. This time we give thanks to Waffle Pie, Isaac Pierce, Lady Nevermore, Viola Pro, Matt Vasquez, Ryan Kettles, Jason and Gamma, our terrifying twosome at every premiere, and Penny Tails Up for giving us that valuable time. Want to get a shout out? Be sure to join our premieres or leave a comment below and I'll do my darndest to find the ones that stand out. I hope we can continue this forward growth and spread our spores to the far corners of YouTube, infecting the airways with our intoxicating presence. When we hit 500, we got something wonderful planned. And, one last time, listeners, close your eyes and breathe with me. Remember, no matter how bad things are, how cruel people can be, and how heavy your shoulders may feel with the weight of the world bearing down on them, DuskLight will always be here to lift the load and provide you with some respite. Drink some water, watch a nature documentary, eat some takeout, and sleep on the cool side of the pillow. Start and end each day with kindness in your heart. You matter, you are loved, and every day is another chance. I'll see you again when the sun sets and dusk enters the station.